Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Karim. I am your host, Karim Sirajuddin. Ramadan Mubarak, Ramadan Kareem, everybody. In Islam, one of our 5 pillars is we observe the sacred month of Ramadan, which is the month that we believe the divine sent the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam. And I launched this podcast in Ramadan 2017. In Islam, we follow the lunar calendar, making today the 3rd lunarversary of the podcast. Just wanted to say thanks to everybody who's listened to the show, supported me, especially my patrons who are putting their hard-earned money to keep the show brewing. Please join our growing community today at patreon.com. Links are in every description of the show. Leave us reviews on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen. In today's episode, we'll be learning about health and nutrition and how it also helps strengthen the soul. And then we'll be transitioning into learning more about the lovely organization Celebrate Mercy, which is dedicated to promoting the beauty and mercy of the Prophet ﷺ in the world. Joining me today is Dr. Zeeshan Tayeb. MashaAllah, he's a medical entrepreneur and is currently involved in several projects in the medical industry, as well as he is a board member of the organization called Celebrate Mercy. Dr. Zeeshan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Karim.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So first and foremost, Zeeshan, I wanted to ask you, why did you want to go into the medical industry? How did you find that to be your calling? Because we know in the Muslim community, everybody would love their kid to be a doctor, right? So how was it for you? Was it kind of a similar thing where your mom told you if you weren't a doctor, she'd have a heart attack and be upset with you for the rest of your life? Or was there a different way that you were called to the industry?
That's an excellent question. I would say, and in fact, I was having this conversation with my 12-year-old son the other day because we were talking about, lifestyle and things like that. And he's like, there's a lot of things that my 3 children kind of take for granted, especially the 12-year-old and the 8-year-old. And so we were joking with them and saying that, if you don't end up doing this, then you're gonna actually go downhill from here. So but with that said, my parents actually, alhamdulillah, never really pushed me to do or become a physician or whatnot. It was actually something that I just kind of grew into. And it actually took place, I would say, about my sophomore year in high school, where I really got into my advanced placement biology class. And from there, then I started kind of exploring that field. There, some of the other moms of, the kids that I grew up with were kind of pushing their children into that arena. And so that's where some of our conversation was as we were segueing from high school into college. And so it would just become an interest of mine and started looking into it. And I think just fast forwarding to, what I do as a specialist today, which is rehab medicine and pain management, it was, dealing with situations such as, for example, my mom, who deals with chronic pain. And there's other people that have been in my life that have also had some, issues as such. And I kind of saw, dealing with pain management as a microcosm of life. Even when we look at it from a spiritual perspective, we all deal with pains on some level, spiritual, mental, physical, emotional, and whatnot. And so that's where I kind of led into doing what I do.
MashaAllah. So really to alleviate humankind from suffering and physical pain.
Yes.
MashaAllah. Excellent. Now tell us a little bit more about the specializations you do have. So what exactly does that mean where you help people deal with pain? And tell us more about how that looks in everyday life for, let's say, a patient.
Absolutely. So not all pain management physicians, as the label is, are created equal in a sense. Mm-hmm. So there's different specialties that can lead into pain management. For example, most commonly people have heard of, say, an anesthesiologist that will do pain management.
Right.
And that's usually the most common. My field is known as PM&R, or physical medicine and rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. So I'm a physiatrist. And so what we do is we look at the functionality or any type of intervention that we do. We want to see, does it translate into a functional improvement, right? It could be mental, it could be emotional, but we're looking for small gains. We're not thinking that one medication, one injection, or any other type of intervention is going to actually be the thing that's going to be the panacea for them to improve. It's going to be a combination of different treatment options, and we're not looking for huge gains. We're looking to try to set small goals and try to get people to move forward. Of course, that doesn't always happen, but that's what the goal is.
MashaAllah. Now, how about your specialty in nutrition? Tell us more about that and your interest there.
Yes. So when I was in residency, as I was going through it, I've always had an interest in exercise and nutrition. And for the longest time, even my undergrad major was in biochemistry. And so for the longest time, I thought that I would actually end up going in and maybe being a trainer or something of that sort. There was a time where I thought I was going to be an orthopedic doctor because I didn't know anything more, anything different. Love the guys, but it was very, surgically oriented. And I do minor surgeries, but it wasn't necessarily, I guess, fulfilling what I had thought medicine would be and looking at the whole person and so on. So I knew that the reason people end up with illnesses and sicknesses and problems is because they are lacking in something, right? So, we start to have these, say, micro or macronutrient imbalances or deficiencies, and then we start becoming obese, or we start to get more out of shape, or whatever it may be. We start going down this slippery slope, and then once that happens, what do? Do you just give up, or do you go and seek, what I just say, all Western medicine treatments, just to kind of quote unquote either bandage the problem or what we believe to be a fix for the problem? I think people do that. People are looking for quick fixes, but what I've noted now over the last decade of being in this is that that's not how it works. And there's usually not any quick fixes. And everything that you want and things that you want to get, things that you want improved, it takes time, it takes effort, and ultimately it takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to actually move forward.
Yeah. So, are you able to really implement a holistic model of treatment in your industry, or at least at your clinics? I mean, tell us more about what does holistic medical practice look like compared to, let's say, you use the phrase Western medicine it's just about kind of band-aids or quick fixes. Tell us the difference there between what would be holistic and what would be kind of a quick fix alleviation.
Sure. So in treating the whole person, at least from the model that I'm more of an expert in, which happens to be in the pain management realm, like I aforementioned, it's not about finding a single procedure or a single medication or whatnot to try to make this person better. It's about looking for potential roots of the problem. So when a person comes into our clinic, we're looking at a functional assessment. So we have our own physical therapy and chiropractic program. So we'll get assessments from those providers. We're not necessarily telling the patient that they need to go down and see the physical therapist and chiropractic to get like a full blown out treatment, but at the least to go and get an assessment. So we're getting a functional evaluation. We also have mental health professionals, counseling, because we do deal with addiction on the other end of the continuum. And so we also have those people do some consult work and some preliminary work to ascertain, what level of risk these individuals are at when it comes to being able to deal with certain types of medications. For example, we're dealing with the opioid epidemic right now in the United States of America and around the world, and so that's why that's one of the reasons it's important for us to do that risk mitigation. But again, we're getting into their social history, their mental health, and it's not something that I do as an individual because I don't have time for that, but I do have a system and a program and people that are empowered to be able to do that so that we can take that into consideration when we're making our medical decisions for that individual.
That's excellent. So I'm hearing you say that if a patient comes to you, they're likely going to be evaluated by a chiropractic, a mental health practitioner, and all of that information has to be integrated into your medical evaluation. So you really try to cover the different dimensions of the human experience and condition to have a more efficient intervention plan. Would you say I understood you correctly?
You did understand that correctly. That's absolutely correct. And, furthermore, we also get blood work. So there's a lot of things, we can do what's the least invasive or what we would call like the minimal things. Fine, we're giving medications, we're injecting things into people. There's some minimal blood work that probably needs to be done. We look into micronutrients. So we're looking at like vitamins and minerals and things like that, those types of deficiencies, so that we can at least educate the patient and say that, hey, you got a pretty bad deficiency over here. This may help you if we start correcting this. This could be one of the reasons why you have a problem, or the problem that you may have. We're also looking at, like I said, hormones and things like that, because an individual's hormonal milieu or their makeup could also be one of the reasons why they're imbalanced in their life, why they have brain fog, or why they're fatigued, why they can't focus, why they're putting on weight and can't work it off, why they don't have the motivation to actually go out and do activity that they need to do, why they have the cravings that they do. And also, just in terms of, when those kind of things are not checked and they're not balanced, it just, leads a person to not be able to heal or even to respond to procedures. They can't sleep, they get depressed. And it's just, a long list of things that happens when, certain things are just not either balanced, or if they're just deficient. So we try to look at all of that and integrate that in.
MashaAllah. Now, as someone who studies human physiology in great depth and detail, do you find ayat of Allah in the physiology of the human being? Because I've met people on both sides of it. Like, they think there's random stuff in the human body that doesn't seem to indicate a designer. While on the other hand, of course, you have people that are like, this is clearly a designed creature here. It's very unlikely that it evolved to be this organized biological system through other natural mechanisms that have no conscious guidance. What are your thoughts about that?
That's really interesting. So when you asked me that question earlier about my interest in nutrition, when I think about micronutrients, whether it be vitamins or minerals and things like that, there's probably several different ayah that actually talk about this, but the one that kind of comes to mind is the one in Surah Al-Rahman, about being created from clay. Right. So when I think about that and where we came from, when I think about that, we're from the ground, and what's in the ground,
right,
it's these different vitamins and minerals. So we're kind of going back to our origin. We're trying to get in a sense balanced out with nature. We're trying to get in a sense grounded again.
right.
And when we don't have those things in balance, how can we be grounded? So that was actually one of the impetus for me to be able to kind of look into that and really seriously start looking into, what does this all mean, and why these things go awry.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's when you look at the back of a vitamin bottle, you don't just have vitamin A, B, C, D, right? You also have magnesium and zinc and iron and copper. And it's like, a lot of people forget that. Like, yeah, the very stuff that's in Earth itself, we're made of, right?
Yes.
And we forget that sometimes the issues that we have is because of an iron deficiency, or because a certain vitamin or nutrient isn't there. Now, based on your observations, what are some of the most common deficiencies, let's say in the population you've worked with, currently have a lack of? Like, what are we missing out on with modern diets and modern lifestyles? What would be kind of your overall feedback on that?
Well, I think you just mentioned a couple of them. It's actually, I think people these days are actually deficient in several of those arenas. And a lot of it has to do with processed foods, or the types of foods that we take in. So when you're putting in bad, you're not able to actually get the good. And then as you put the bad in, it kind of clogs up the system so that you can't even absorb a lot of these micronutrients and so on. Right. So you keep putting the garbage in. There's not space for the good stuff to go through. And when you do put it in, it won't even absorb correctly. So, putting people on a regimen where you have prebiotics, probiotics, kind of to help out the gut health so that things can potentially heal again. And, you can actually start taking in, these other micronutrients and then be able to absorb them.
Just to clarify that. So if I eat McDonald's every day for the last 10 years, is there almost like a crustation in my intestines and my stomach, which basically almost serves like a wall, so that if I'm eating salads and all this good stuff now, you're saying it can't actually literally be pulled in or absorbed in because of that barrier? Can you tell us more about how that really works?
Yeah, so when you take in processed foods, foods that have been modified or genetically modified and so on, you're going to develop essentially like a sludge in your system, and you're also going to set off free radicals, which is a form or a mechanism for damage to take place. It can take place in your arteries, which is why people can then develop coronary artery disease and other things that go along with that. Heart attacks and strokes and so on. And then you can also develop, like I said, absorption earlier. And so there's a healing process, and some of it you can't turn back the clock completely, right? So that's why, there's digestive enzymes out there. That's why there are probiotics and prebiotics and things like that. And that's if these things are done in excess or just continually, like you said, 10 years of McDonald's over time.
Yeah, too many gyros, man. You gotta clean that out,
Yeah. So, but there are ways to, to turn some of that back around, to heal, and that's why, there's different methods. It's not, that there's a one model fits all, obviously. Right. Some people, right, they're young enough and healthy enough where you could, just do some simple macronutrient balance. For other people, they're going to probably need to get on some type of hormonal regimen to actually, quote unquote, turn back the clock in a sense, and to give themselves a living chance to, move forward. Obviously, there's a lot of other implications, if I may just throw this in as well, between, for being balanced in this, because there's a significant amount of spiritual benefit with this. There's a lot of times where sometimes we just don't have the energy to get up and go and pray, or to pull out the Quran, or whatever it is. And, the Prophet, peace be upon him, had mentioned that a stronger believer is better than a weaker believer. And you can't be a stronger believer unless you're putting in the right things and, exercising. So you have to have the fuel, and then you also have to use that fuel and that energy that you've been blessed with and translate it into some type of action. But, our body is an amana, so it's a trust to us, and we need to take care of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what would you say are some general tips that our listeners can benefit from? And give us some of the simplest ones you can think of. I know for me, like, I'm a water addict. I love drinking water. I'll have maybe like 5 of these a day easily, so I always feel 100 times better when I'm just hydrated and I just feel all that water flowing through us. So remember, Allah says we were created from clay. What is clay? It's earth and water put together, and we're mostly water. So this is also the substance of life and purity. This is why it's integral to our religion, right? We have wudu and ghusl and zamzam, and Allah talks about the merit of water coming from the heavens to nourish us on the planet. If Allah didn't send down rain, we'd all be dead. I mean, we never really think about that, but
right,
we're in trouble if Allah turns off the faucet from up top. Subhanallah.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the coffee is actually really good too. So
great, because that's my second most drunk drink.
Yeah, you definitely need the water afterwards. I would say, in terms of basic tips, I think it's really going back to basics and fundamentals. I think in life in general, a lot of us, whether it be from a spiritual perspective, from a mental perspective, physical perspective, I feel that because of how things are portrayed in social media, and you only get the kind of like the best of the best kind of flashing out there, we think that it's one of two things, or one of maybe three things. One is that it's unattainable, so I'm not going to do anything and I'm not going to change. The next is I'm going to start and I'm going to try, but then you overdo it, and then you become not depressed, but you kind of lose motivation, and then you stop. And then the third is where you actually start and you actually do make progress, but you feel like I never measure up, so that I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about just making small steps, taking a step back and saying, let me stick to basics. So whether it's practicing, your deen or whatever it is, let's just start with maybe one prayer a day, or let's start, just maybe even opening up the mushaf, the book of the holy book, or whatever it may be, or even doing, dhikr for 15 seconds. So the same thing is what I usually recommend to patients when it comes to, just trying to change their life or their lifestyle. You can talk about, okay, yeah, your lifestyle is really bad, and, we can't do anything, to necessarily change or turn back the clock, but that's like saying, okay, there's no hope. There's no, there's no mercy. There's no, what's the reason for living then?
Right.
And so what I say is like, okay, when we come from a diet perspective, there's actually, some nutritionists now that actually don't necessarily recommend taking out necessarily all the bad stuff, right? Because now, like, for example, the McDonald's or eating the candy bars or whatever it may be, they say, you know what, go ahead and fine, do that, but start putting in some good things. So fine, you're eating a candy bar, but here, go and find like a fruit that you like. And what you'll notice over time is you'll start taking in a little bit of the bananas and the oranges or whatever that you like, and you'll start to notice that, you know what, I might be able to bypass that candy bar today, or I might be able to take a little bit less, and you'll slowly start changing over a period of time. So I can see obviously that there's analogies for that. I think even spiritually, you may have an issue, an addiction, or some problem that you may have, but continue to do that good. Don't give up. Don't lose hope, and try to plug in something good. And it kind of follows that whole principle of if the overriding principle for that is the 1/3 food, 1/3 water, 1/3 breath, and that's not supposed to be like the what it's supposed to be. That's actually considered the max, right? So fine, if you want a goal to look at or a goal to strive for, that's in our in our literature, in our tradition, that's something to kind of look at and say, okay, well, I might not be able to get down to that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but if I start putting in some of these good things, you start to have less cravings and maybe things start to turn around. So moderation. It's all about moderation, but try to plug in the good, and then the bad hopefully will start to just dissipate out. Number 2, I would say, exercise, right? Everybody knows that, yeah, we need to go out there, we need to be physical, we need to exercise and so on. Well, I don't need to go and run a marathon. I don't need to go and, lift, 300 pounds or 500 pounds or whatever it is. Let me just start with some basic things. So maybe I can go out and instead of taking the escalator or the elevator in one place, I can take the stairs one day. Or I could probably, if I'm doing a desk job, maybe I can stand up a little bit while I'm working, or get up and just move around just a little bit more. I got this gift just the other day. My family got me a Fitbit just to kind of track, these steps. I'm never into that kind of stuff, but it's kind of cool. And it just tells you, it starts buzzing after a little while, and it tells you to kind of get up and move, go and take a couple hundred steps or whatnot. So there's benefit from even doing like those little things. There are days where, I go to the office and or offices or whatnot and have really long days. I'm not able to go in and get what I would call a traditional workout. With dealing with, masjid activities, nonprofit activities, 5 different businesses, and then the family. There's days where I don't have that opportunity. So I can squeeze in probably pretty much a full workout in about 5 minutes, in the morning and in the afternoon at work. I could probably do, 30 pull-ups in about a minute. I can do about 30 push-ups in a minute, and I can do a few air squats. And I have a couple.
Me too. No, I'm kidding.
so alhamdulillah, you just do just that, those couple minutes worth. And that's, that might be the exercise for the day, but it gets the heart going, and, at least you have something. And, probably a little bit more of a practical thing for an individual. Fine. Maybe you can't do a push-up. Maybe you can't do a pull-up. But, most people can squat to a certain degree or do something. You just have to find something that kind of fits you, even if it's just a couple of small little dumbbells or whatever it is. And, whatever it may be, just that even getting up and moving, maybe that's what it is. But start from somewhere. And then try to become consistent with it.
Yeah. So let me just summarize the 2 points before you go to number 3.
Sure.
The first one on advice for how to improve our overall lifestyle with health and nutrition. Number 1, certainly moderation in food intake. I've had these discussions with other people, like, these fancy diets and, I'm going to be 500 calories. It's like, look, just follow the sunnah. If you just eat less and stop what we call human portions, all that stuff is going to take care of itself. Right? It's not that complicated, right? Just have moderation in your intake. The other point on that first tip is if you want to eat cookies, or Snicker bars or whatever, or fried foods and so on and so forth, start by not telling yourself you have to get rid of all that. And now you're eating salads with no flavor. That's unlikely going to be sustainable. But start injecting or incorporating healthy food choices with all that kind of processed stuff that you're already eating, and slowly that can help refine your palate. And I know exactly what you're talking about, by the way, because I remember getting to a place in my life once where eating a carrot tasted so sweet.
Yes.
A date tasted like pure caramel to me. I'm like, wow, this is God's candy right here. But if you're eating, peanut butter cups, which is one of my vices, and then you try to eat an apple or a plum, you're like, this just not doing it.
It's just not, yeah.
So yeah, it's not going to hit you the same way. But if you don't eat that stuff, and then when I found myself my palate was kind of refined towards fruits and healthy food, when I would go eat like a candy bar, it actually tasted almost bitter because of how sweet it was. It was like sugar on crack.
Right.
So you're suggesting moderation and slowly changing your palate by introducing healthier and healthier foods, and making sure that that's part of your diet, and slowly escalating or increasing in that percentage or that dosage. Correct?
That is correct.
And the second tip is, look, exercise. The body is built to move. You start with whatever you can, whether it's, a few dumbbells, a couple of push-ups, taking 15-minute walks, doing some stretching. You don't need to go sign up for fancy memberships. It doesn't mean you have to work out for 1 to 2 hours a day. 5 to 10 minutes a day is still better than nothing, and that's still going to take you far, especially if you do it every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, American Heart Association recommends, 5 days a week, 30 minutes of, moderate exercise. And of course, moderate is, how do you define moderate? They do have some further explanation about what they believe to be moderate. And I look at that and I'm like, I don't even know if I'm doing that today. And that's, that's coming from the American Heart Association. I probably am. But, sometimes when I look at it, sometimes I'm like, wow, how is this supposed to be the standard? When you look at, 35% of the nation and, that has some level of chronic pain, and 30+% of the nation that's actually obese. We have like 100 million people in some type of pain, which obviously limits mobility. And then we also have, between adults and children, about 90 million people that are considered obese. And there's some standards for that as well.
That's insane numbers, man.
Yeah.
Wow. That's almost like what, 1 out of 4 Americans are obese?
Yeah, we're looking at it's about 1 out of 3 actually. So that it ends up being about like 30% in terms of the obesity numbers, and then the chronic pain numbers. It's almost like 4 out of 10 people are going to have some type of debilitating condition where they cannot. They're considered either partially disabled or disabled.
La ilaha illallah. Wow, that's intense, man. May Allah guide us. So how about tip number 3 on general advice to improve our well-being and health?
Yes. Probably tip number 3 was one that I had to try to inculcate into my life, and I still have issues with this, which is why I made it number 3. But it's sleep. And I've noted.
Oh, good one.
Yeah. And I've noted that, sleep actually it's truly is a godsend. And when I, in looking at, the way, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, advised us and asked us to kind of schedule our days, it's such a deep and beautiful thing when we look at salah, and that we have, it's based off of the sun and the moon and whatnot. We have when Fajr is Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha. And the recommendation is go to bed after your Isha prayer, and then get up early. And there's actually, there's some good evidence and, things like that to show that, when you go to bed earlier, you're actually more in tune with your body's physiology. You had mentioned something about physiology earlier, so you're more in tune with your body's physiology, because that's when your melatonin levels or your natural endogenous melatonin levels start to kick in. And that's when you're going to probably get your most restful and most what I call productive or anabolic sleep. And that allows your body then to grow, to heal, to respond. And then it actually helps mitigate some of these pain issues and so on. Now, if your body, of course, is lacking these micro and macronutrients that we were talking about earlier, these hormonal imbalances and so on, it's probably not going to be as a productive or anabolic sleep, but you're trying to match yourselves up once again with nature. And of course, following the advice of our beloved, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So sleep, I think, is huge. It's critical. And it's not necessarily, a lot of what they put out there is about quantity of sleep. And I can't argue with that literature. However, what I can also put forth is that it sometimes is not practical for some individuals to get that sleep. And I've accepted that I am going to be one of those individuals. I don't sleep more than 4 hours, maybe 5 hours a day. There was a time where I was doing less than that, and I've actually had to improve. And in fact, this Fitbit helps me track it, and I was averaging 4 hours and 7 minutes of sleep a night last week. And it's just one of those things that it is what it is. But what I try to do is I try to get those cycles of what are known as REM cycles, or rapid eye movement cycles, and that's where your most productive and anabolic sleep occurs. And they say you need at least 2 is what you need to survive. 3 is better. Two cycles. Yeah. So the cycle usually will hit about an hour and a half into your sleep. So if you're looking at about 3 hours of sleep, if it all works out exact, then you should have had at least, hopefully about 2 cycles of REM sleep. If you get about 4.5 hours, which is what I'm striving for, then you can get 3, and you actually you can get restful and healing sleep and so on. But also if your hormonal and nutritional milieu is optimized, you'll actually get a lot more out of that sleep than someone else that's maybe on the other end of the spectrum. But what I am gunning for, and I have had at times, is 6 hours of sleep. And 6 hours is where you can potentially get in about four of those cycles, and that's usually what's good. So when they say you need about 6 to 8 hours of sleep, what they're looking for is that 4th or 5th cycle of REM. And so that's from a quantity standpoint.
Right.
We're looking at it from just a qualitative standpoint. Optimize optimize your engine. Put the right fuel in. If you're getting in the proper diet, the proper exercise, and you've got everything else all tanked up, your sleep will also be more efficient as well.
And one of the things I learned from you is that you shouldn't eat before you sleep, right? That there should be definitely a cutoff point of consuming anything before you sleep. I think, a good general rule might be nothing after Maghrib, right? Just water, if anything. Because when some people snack at night when they work, like 11 or 12, and then they go to bed. That can also impact the quality of your sleep and all of these cycles and hormonal releases being optimized. Is that accurate?
That's 100% true. And I could actually comment a little bit more on that. So when you start going past that phase where you're supposed to be sleeping, what'll happen is your cortisol levels, right, which is the physiologic response of stress, right? So you start to tax your body to a certain degree with that stress or that stress hormone. That then impairs your body's ability then to produce your anabolic hormones like the growth hormone and the testosterone and so on, like your sex hormones, which then affects your ability to sleep, to heal, to engage in other night activities, assuming that you're married, other things that also just allow you to get into that rapid eye movement sleep. So, and then you start getting other cravings. Right. So that's also a time where, fine, it could be food. It could be other issues that people may have. That's when you start, your mind starts to wander, then you don't fall asleep, and then you start to go down whatever slippery slope that, your trial and tribulation is in life. So that's why there's a lot of wisdom behind trying to, turn off when you should be turning off so that you don't indulge in whatever it is. Because now you have a physiologic response tied to it. And it has to do with those cortisol levels.
Interesting. Now, on this note of sleep, Dr. Zeeshan, screen time is another thing now that's been introduced to our lives in the last 5-10 years, right? So a lot of people need the screen to sometimes fall asleep.
Sure.
Why do you think that's happening? And is that necessarily a good or bad thing?
I see. Well, so that blue light actually impairs the ability for the body to produce melatonin, and actually will then impair the body's ability to go into REM sleep. So I'm not saying get rid of it completely, but I'm saying minimize it. Or if you're going to be doing something, maybe it could be audio related, right? Put on, plug in the headphones or whatever it is. But that light definitely is impairing our ability to get that anabolic or that restful sleep. And it's also not the most healthiest way to go to bed. But again, I'm not here to tell people don't do something that may already be working to some degree, but just know that you're not getting the most out of it.
So this is all very merciful guidance and tips on health and nutrition, which leads me to my next interest, which is this lovely organization known as Celebrate Mercy. And so tell us more about this organization, what's its purpose, and what are some of the major milestones it's achieved, because it's done some very lovely things.
Absolutely. So Celebrate Mercy, and Bismillah, inshallah, hopefully I'll be able to give it justice. The individual Tariq El-Masidi, the founder of Celebrate Mercy, is a very near and dear friend of mine and colleague in this. Regarding Celebrate Mercy, it started back in about 2010. That's when the first webinar, which was one of the ways Celebrate Mercy started in terms of its outreach and so on. It was just putting together different types of speakers. There could have been poets, there could have been singers, it could have been renowned scholars like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf or Imam Zaid and so on. Getting different people to come together from different backgrounds, not just from maybe one school of thought or whatnot, but just bringing. It was a culmination of just all the beauty in Islam kind of coming together and putting it together on a webinar. And the reason these people agreed, all right, to come together for this cause and for this purpose, I believe, has to do with what the mission of Celebrate Mercy happens to be, which in a nutshell is basically putting out the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, out there for the world to see. What greater mission is that? I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing as Muslims anyway. But the problem is that people have done it in so many different ways. People will, there's people that say, okay, you got to go out and obey the laws. And there's other people that say it's about the long beard and the short pants, being in dhikr all day or being at the masjid all day and so on. But we've missed the essence of what Islam and what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, stood for. And what Aisha radiallahu anh, alluded to in saying that the Prophet, peace be upon him, that his character was like that of the walking Quran, right? And so, teaching about the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about his life and character through the works and actions, right? To Muslims and friends of other faiths is what the mission of Celebrate Mercy is. So the organization has been running now for about 8 years now, and it's not just the webinars, but it's there's some really nice trailers. Like if you go to celebratemercy.com, you'll see that over the years different trailers were put together. It's very well put together. It's almost like very cinematic actually. It's Tariq and a group of people that would go to different places, different countries, different settings in terms of being able to put all of this stuff together. So it's beautiful work. But then people started wondering, like, is this, what is all this leading to? And so, other things that CM or Celebrate Mercy has done now is different campaigns. So when some type of like extremist activity takes place, what happened in San Bernardino there in California, Paris. What happened to those children in North Carolina that were doing the service work and got killed by their neighbor. The desecration of the Jewish cemeteries around the U.S. I think most specifically in St. Louis. There's multiple stories where Celebrate Mercy basically responded to that evil with good. Basically trying to exemplify the way that the Prophet, peace be upon him, would have recommended, or himself, peace be upon him, would have handled the situation with love and mercy. And so, the idea behind this organization is to show, again, through the works and the actions, what the Prophet, peace be upon him, was, what he stood for, and ultimately what this organization now stands for. You can't love something or love someone without knowing them. So the other big proponent is that to know him is to love him. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Of course. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Also Celebrate Mercy also is doing events like local events, so if there's, people that are interested in wanting to bring us out there to a given location.
How has the reception been, Dr. Zeeshan, let's say with the non-Muslim community, when Celebrate Mercy tried to step in and manifest the character of the Prophet?
Yes.
Tell us more about the feedback and the success stories.
Okay, yes, that's huge. Now, I think Sister Ustada, Dalia Mogahid, actually kind of put it best. She said that Celebrate Mercy, even in its limited way, has actually brought about. I'm not quoting her directly, but basically, she said that it has brought about a more positive presence in the media and social media realm, or in the social media world, more so than any other organization across the nation at this point. So subhanallah, in each of those situations that I was just alluding to before, those different campaigns, like with what happened, with those children in North Carolina, there was a event that was put together, to feed the hungry, or to feed the neighbors and so on. And that brought about national publicity. When the ambassador Christopher Stevens was killed, and what was done for that was getting letters together and getting it delivered to to his family. That brought about major publicity. So Tariq has been on CNN multiple times. He has got he's done tons of interviews, even like with the Jewish cemetery situation that happened. He ended up meeting some prominent Jewish folks, and we have started getting donations now, not just from Muslims. In fact, some of the biggest donors now to Celebrate Mercy are actually non-Muslims. So like massive donations. We're not talking like little chump change. So there's definitely people out there that believe in this mission, or and believe in solidarity, and believe that that we can, in some sense, be one. And so,
وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ.
Yes.
That's the verse that we always quote, and I know Celebrate Mercy. Allah says we sent the Prophet Muhammad as a mercy to all the worlds, and I always find that beautiful, because the word Muhammad, for those of us that don't know, it comes from hamada, hamd, to praise, something that's praiseworthy. So the name Muhammad means you can't stop praising the man.
Yes.
He has so many qualities, and yet Allah chose Rahmah as the one to describe him as he was sent to all the worlds for this, even though he was also sent as a guidance, as a light, and so on and so forth. But Rahmah is that focal point, and as well as the focal point of Allah's names and attributes himself. As we know, every surah except for Surah At-Tawbah begins with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, even though God has 99 names. He could have said Bismillah al-Karim al-Majid, Bismillah al-Hamid al-Aziz. Different surahs could have had different attributes, but always Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is really striking when you reflect.
Subhanallah. Thank you for sharing that. Jazakallah.
MashaAllah. So, where do you see Celebrate Mercy going in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's an excellent question, and that's something we've talked about in our board meetings. So one is obviously not resting where we are today. In terms of further development, we continue to do webinars, we continue to do these events in different places. And as things will probably continue to happen, these different types of what I would call acts of extremism and things like that, Celebrate Mercy will still be there to try to respond to those. We've continued to have a great social media presence, and I would say that going forward, having more formal classes, maybe some online classes. We're looking at Umrah. And potentially, like Hajj trips, being able to, get people going on all of these. The specific place that Tariq actually wants to try to take people, and he's had dreams about this actually, is to take people to Jerusalem, right? So part of the trip, whether it be for Hajj or for Umrah, is to include that to include in that package a trip to Jerusalem, to the Holy Land there. So that is a couple of the big things that we're looking at trying to do with CM. But the big message with Celebrate Mercy in terms of what I mean, and there's many different points. You can see that getting the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, out there is important on so many different levels. But if I had to just put forth just a couple points, you can see that with the types of response that we have gotten from Muslims as well as non-Muslims, because there's Muslims out there that were, say, for example, at the brink of leaving Islam, or there were people that that were there's statistics and numbers out there about converts that come into that obviously accept Islam but then they leave like right away, and so we're looking at those types of things, and we're looking at, okay, we've always believed the faith, if you try to do parts of it or inculcate it into your life, that it's transformational. It definitely can be, something that can, change one's life and one's life around them. And this, we're hoping could be a means or a mechanism to actually help spearhead some of that for certain people. And people have said that it has done that for them, be it Muslim or non-Muslim. The other thing is that we have, I guess it's like, a quarter of the people right now that don't necessarily even affiliate themselves with religion. And so some people say that, okay, it's not necessarily Muslims, right? It's that could be happening with other people, because it was a Pew study that said that a quarter of people don't even attribute themselves to some type of a religious background. But they're saying now that there's actually one out of four Muslims that grew up, say, in a Muslim household or with some type of Muslim ideology, don't even claim themselves to be Muslim anymore. And then we went further and then started asking children, right, at these different events, and they actually said that 1/3, right, so 1 out of 3 Muslim children don't want their friends to know that they're Muslim.
This is also part of the Pew research?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's a faith crisis that's kind of going on.
It's also a branding crisis if you think about it.
And then of course with the the Islamophobia, right? We're in the day and age of Donald Trump and so on. I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but with the Islamophobia that's out there, we need people, organizations and things like that to basically say that that's not what we're about. And when I was, if I even take a step back and I look at, you asked me earlier about why am I involved with, with pain management or rehab medicine and things like that. I see the mission behind being in rehab and pain, like I alluded to before, is like it's a microcosm of life, and it's maybe one way that I can kind of contribute to people at large at how to maybe turn or give someone an opportunity to be empowered to turn one's life back around, right? Maybe give them the tools or at least lay it out in front of them so that they can potentially turn around. But the other way, tying oneself, or tying oneself to a cause, we talk about things on a very basic or general level, tie yourself to good people and tie yourself to a good place, like the masjid, for example, right? Tying yourself to good company and to good people is what it's recommended, throughout our literature, right? So that, because your deen or your practice becomes of your, or your character becomes that of, the people whom you're around or that you associate with. What better organization than the group that's trying to take the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, out there? And that it's Muslims and non-Muslims, fine, people are buying in and people are, being transformed. But to me, this was an opportunity to basically put my time, my family, everything that God has blessed me with, these businesses and whatever that we have, into an organization like this, because I don't see a better vehicle than this for me to be able to, attain what I need in my akhirah, or what I'm hoping for in my akhirah. Right? I have many issues, many deficiencies, and many, problems. And this is my using that analogy that I was using earlier, this is my fruit. I've got a lot of Snickers bars and a lot of other things in my life. This is my fruit, hopefully, that will hopefully, kind of fill that void, and so that I can, eliminate some of that other bad stuff.
Ameen, Ya Rab. May Allah bless you and Brother Tariq and everyone involved and all the people that have supported it. And it's really interesting because it does kind of link to even your profession, Dr. Zeeshan, where alleviation of pain and suffering. Celebrate Mercy is also trying to do that on a more social community level, because the opposite of mercy is, and opposite of mercy in good is evil and suffering and oppression. And this is usually the essential force behind any healthy religious worldview, right? Is to bring more mercy and goodness and virtue and beauty to the world and eradicate the opposite. And that's why, for instance, we have evil and ugliness happening, because if it didn't, then there would be no opportunity for us to replace it or to work with. As St. Thomas Aquinas said, a famous Christian mystic, he was kind of like the El-Ghazali of Christendom. He said the evil is simply the absence of good, and good is the default setting. We also know this in Islam, the fitra. Allah also says, that He established the balance and the harmony in things. And then when we follow the guidance, we basically become harmonious with reality. But if we go against it, this is where we start to see oppression and corruption amongst ourselves and others, and we're only hurting ourselves, as Allah says, right? It's not affecting God, it's affecting us on a day-to-day. So I found Celebrate Mercy's projects and these opportunities that they kind of use to really manifest. It's just been so exciting to watch, and I'm very happy to see its success, and may Allah continue to make it grow, and looking forward to see what happens next, bi'idhnillah. Dr. Zeeshan, I know you've got a lot of people to go treat, so thank you for your time, and inshallah, Allah bless you and your family. And any final thoughts or closing statements you'd like to share with our audience?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jazakallah khair, for the opportunity. And inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bless you and bless your work. Because obviously, you are able to, bring people, why you actually chose me beats the heck out of me, but alhamdulillah, but with everybody, that, you've had, the opportunity to kind of touch and, be a part of their lives. I think it's probably been, if it's, the way it's been for me, I know it's been an amazing ride for me, and I'm sure it's been even greater for others. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to allow you to do and excel in the work that you do, and continue to bless, all your future endeavors and your family. Ameen.
إلا الله